But at the same time, we also read about some of the great fathers of the church, one of whom was Augustine of Hippo, not Augustine of Canterbury. And Augustine of Hippo recorded his writings on his confessions, the Confessions of St. Augustine. And we had to study that book as a part of the reading list. And we had to write essays on that spiritual journey. I don't think the priests realized, or our superiors realized, what an influence that would have on some of us, because Augustine really related to us what it meant to be converted.
You mean that reading Augustine's writing didn't actually bring you into Romanism, it brought you away?
It began to stir questions. Then I started to read the Bible because, of course, the famous text that Augustine heard in the garden was "Tolle lege," take it up and read.
Mm-hmm.
And what did he take up and read? But he took up the Bible. And I had a Bible. I had been given a Bible by my loving parents when I was 18. They knew I was religious, and the best thing to do is buy him a Bible. So they did. So in the providence of God, I was reading a Bible in the Roman Catholic Seminary. It wasn't necessarily an accepted version in a Roman Catholic seminary, but I read it anyway, and I began to realize the scriptures are true, the scriptures are reliable, the person of Christ is at the center of Christianity, not the church, not the popes, not the councils, not the catechisms, not the confessions. And so I came to the conclusion that Christ, an encounter with Christ, changed the lives of ordinary people, one of whom is the paralytic. When Christ has this great crowd in his home, in the home in Capernaum, and this man is lowered down through the ceiling after his friends had destroyed the roof of the house owner. The man is probably full of desire and anticipation of being healed. But the first thing Christ says is, "Son, thy sins are forgiven thee." And that showed everything to me. The emphasis of Christ's ministry was forgiveness. And who can forgive sins but God alone? It's found in another place.
And again, to look at Augustine, it's like, okay, some people might be listening to this, and like the typical modern argument is, I don't know if it's modern. I don't know how long it's been around, but many people will say, but he's a Catholic. They think, if you read Augustine, that, and if you follow, not that you should follow any man, he has his errors, he has his foibles like we all do, but that people think, especially people who haven't read him, that if you read him, you're going to become a Roman Catholic. Because, Augustine's seen, is he not, as one of the doctors of the Roman Catholic Church, him and Thomas Aquinas. So we can just explain to people, because I think people don't realize Augustine wasn't a Roman Catholic.
No. Roman Catholicism as a term and as a title only really occurred at the end of the 1500s, after the Council of Trent. And you can read about their anathemas against biblical Christianity online.
There's a lot of them.
There's so many.
Yeah.
But Augustine himself was a very worldly man, a very pleasure-seeking man. He was brought up in a mixed home. His mother was a Christian, but he wasn't, and he threw it all overboard. And a bit like young people today, he thought, well, I'll just live for today. I'll live for the pleasures of today. He had his own mistress. He had a child out of wedlock. He didn't fit into any kind of a religious sphere. And yet, he was searching. He was always searching. And he says in his writings, and I'm paraphrasing here, I'm not quoting directly. If I had to know you were going to ask me about Augustine, I would have prepared in advance.
I'm just springing it on you.
Yes, you are. And so he talks about seeking true love, and that we look in all the wrong places. And is that not like the world we live today, like the society we live in? People are investing their love or their desires in all the wrong things. And then, of course, Augustine, I can quote this one, said this famously. He said, "Our hearts are never at rest, and we find our rest in thee." And Augustine, in many ways, mirrored my own experience. He was a restless soul. He had invested so much energy and time. He's a brilliant man, a brilliant intellectual, in in pursuit of knowledge. Um, he had joined a movement called the Manichees. You can find out more about them later yourself. Um, but really, he was restless, and he had all that the world had promised him, and yet he was still not satisfied. He was still not at peace. And it was through that search that I realized that I would never be right with God. I would never be at peace unless I found
Mm.
the Savior whom Augustine had. But I wouldn't have been able to put it as succinctly as that in the late 1990s.